So let's start with Ukraine. We've got Putin and China putting on this show of unity, and we've got China pushing forward with a new offensive. In light of all that, what's the significance of this China trip?
Well, Ruby, I think that part of it is the psychology of Vladimir Putin as well. At a time when he's in China showing that he can travel, it's his first major trip outside Russia since the war, at the same time as the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy is cancelling his overseas assignments. And I think that firstly, that points to the reality on the ground. Ukraine is slowly losing this war. There's no doubt about that. A lot of the media don't really want to say that because the sympathies are with Ukraine, but Ukraine is slowly losing the war. It doesn't mean they're going to lose it, but right at this moment, Ukrainian soldiers are in retreat and they're not advancing anywhere else on the front line. It's a long front line of about 1,200 kilometres, and they're holding their ground in some places, but they're retreating around Kharkiv. I was in Kharkiv last year for the ABC, and Kharkiv, it's extraordinary to look at pictures now, but it used to be one of Europe's great university towns. Students would come not only from around Ukraine, but internationally. Now, the Ukrainian army are evacuating some people, older people, frail people, and the Russians are on the move, and the Americans are starting to panic. And in a way, America has calibrated its assistance, has been very slow in delivery of stuff, has not provided what Ukraine needed, which was F-16s, and we're now seeing the consequences that Ukraine is losing this war.
And as you mentioned there, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been cancelling his trips overseas, so he's clearly concerned as well. Yeah,
I think they are starting. They don't want it to be too obvious, but I've made, 3 trips there to Ukraine now, and my sense is that they are starting to panic. They can see the advance of Russian soldiers. The Russians already have 20% of Ukraine, and they're moving in. And the delay in the US Congress at getting aid in, all of that means that Ukraine is now on the defensive. The other strategic thing is that in the 8 or 10 months that the world talked about the famous counteroffensive by Ukraine, there was a lot of expectations on that. Russia prepared during those 8 or 10 months by digging the most extraordinary system of trenches and barbed wire and hidden mines, etc. It appears that the Ukrainians didn't dig such defensive lines themselves. So it's easier now for the Russians to actually cross back and take more territory because the Ukrainians assumed that they would be on the counter-offensive. And all countries all around the world were promising all sorts of Leopard tanks and this and that, and we'll train F-16 pilots. A lot of that never came, and what came was too slow. And now the world's dealing with the reality that Russia is winning this war.
Part of that help that has come, albeit quite delayed, is from the US, and the Secretary of State has announced more aid for Ukraine. Is that a case of too little, too late? What kind of difference will that make?
Well, it's better than nothing. And it's interesting, Antony Blinken uses the term that we are rushing ammunition to Ukraine. And I think the use of that word says everything. This war's been going on 2.5 years. You'd think it would be an organised, calibrated supply of weapons now, but with the uncertainty and the delay in America in getting that bill through, there's the fear of Trump as well now. In a way, Vladimir Putin's always been holding on until he wants Trump back in the White House. Trump is Putin's candidate. And that could mean that Trump just calls an end to the war and says to both sides, OK, stop it. You keep what you have, which would be defeat for Ukraine. They'd lose 20% of their territory, and they would then turn on each other internally. I don't think a leader like Zelenskyy, anybody could survive having lost 20% of your territory. So it would unleash a lot of bad forces inside Ukraine.
So a lot depending on the outcome of that US election.